So we'll start in earnest. Welcome to this conversation on planning for change management. It is part of a series of webinars that P4PE Institute organizes on a periodic basis, featuring various talks from thought leaders, conversations around things that could make line management, leadership, and HR deliver more results as the case is. Today's conversation is on planning for change management. P4PE Institute is a consulting firm that has been around since 2011 and have focused in creating and delivering value across business growth, HR consulting, HR transformation, and of course, also in organizational development. We have various solutions in the market that we're able to use to deliver some of these particular value, including business transformation, corporate performance management, HR solutions, training and development solutions, career solutions for executives, and also focus on the mid-sized businesses, as the case is. My name is Joel Omike. I'm taking conversation on this particular program today. I am a trusted advisor. I engage executives in the past 22 years, helping them to configure their institution, change their organization, and get the best value from the resources that we have at their disposal. In the past, I've had a career across 7 consulting business initiatives, across and engaging over 81 companies. So I'll be sharing some of those experiences from the field, what we've learned, what is relevant when it comes to the issue of change management, as the case is. Please, if you have any questions or feedback while the session is going on, please share it in the chat box, or otherwise wait till the end of the session where we'll have a Q&A, and then we can take questions from everyone in general. Please take notes as much as you can. This particular program, although is being recorded, we will not be sharing the materials directly. Okay, so what are we going to be looking at? We shall be looking at what is change. Why is change important? More importantly, what is strategic change? And how does that help organizations to deliver on their mandates and achieve results at that point in time? We'll also look at businesses or institutions that are in crisis mode. For the past 10 years, the world has been bedeviled by various crises that affect businesses in various areas. There has been various terminologies to describe this crisis, but one that has stuck for a very long time is the VUCA environment that we find ourselves in. What are some of the present change realities that we are facing that institutions must pay attention to so that they can have good results at that point in time? And then in terms of systems thinking, power thinking, what can we do in order to be able to take advantage of this? What are some of the tools and resources that are required in driving change within the environment? These are some thoughts we're going to share in this particular discussion as much as possible. Takeaway, we promise at the end of this conversation that we will be reviewing the need for change. And not only this need, we shall also be reviewing the various change management techniques and models you will find in the market that you could take advantage of. We'll also explain the purpose of change management plan and the various tools in that particular area. Somewhere down the line, we'll spend some time discussing for those who are interested in pursuing a career in change management, what are the opportunities for them and what can they focus on at that point in time? Okay, so let's get started with this particular conversation. For us to start, I'd like to share a video, watch a brief video that shows us the various steps involved in the change management process. And then we'll come back and distill and discuss the outcome of this particular video. You may want to take notes and share some thoughts at the end of the video. As the video is playing, feel free to type any message that hits you, any information that hits you that I think is worthy of note from this particular video. It's a very short video. Please confirm you can see the video and you can also hear it.
Businesses must constantly evolve and adapt to meet challenges from.
Please confirm you heard and you also saw the video so I can continue playing it. Beautiful. Thanks, sir. Thank you very much. So let's continue.
Businesses must constantly evolve and adapt to meet challenges, from technology advancements to updated laws and regulations to shifts in economic trends. Failure to do so can lead to stagnation, or worse, failure. Research shows that half of all organizational change initiatives are unsuccessful. It's vital for business leaders to know how to plan, coordinate, and implement change. Organizational change broadly refers to a business's actions to alter or adjust a significant component of how it's organized. This can include culture, internal processes, underlying technology or infrastructure, or hierarchy. Change management is the process of guiding change to fruition, from conception to resolution. Change processes have a set of starting conditions, point A, and a functional endpoint, point B. What happens between is dynamic and unfolds in a series of 5 steps. Step 1 is preparing for change. In the preparation phase, the manager helps employees recognize and understand the need for change. They raise awareness of the challenges or problems driving the change. Gaining initial buy-in from employees can help reduce friction and resistance later on. Step 2 is crafting a vision and plan for change. The plan should detail strategic goals the organization should work toward, key performance indicators for measuring success, stakeholders responsible for implementation and sign-off, and project scope. The plan should also account for obstacles that could arise during implementation that would require agility and flexibility to overcome. Step 3 is implementing change. During implementation, change managers focus on motivating and empowering employees to achieve the initiative's goals. They should also try to anticipate roadblocks and prevent, remove, or mitigate them once identified. Reiterating the organization's vision is critical throughout the implementation process to remind team members why change is being pursued. Step 4 is embedding change within the company culture and practices. This is particularly important for organizational change related to processes, workflows, and strategies. Without an adequate plan, employees can backslide into the old way of doing things, particularly during the transitory period. New organizational structures, controls, and reward systems are all tools that help change stick. And finally, Step 5, reviewing progress and analyzing results. Just because a change initiative is complete doesn't mean it was successful. A project postmortem can help business leaders understand whether a change initiative was a success, failure, or mixed result. It can also offer valuable insights and lessons for future efforts. Key questions to ask during this step include, were project goals met? If yes, can this success be replicated elsewhere? If not, what went wrong? If you've been asked to lead a change initiative or would like to oversee such projects in the future, it's critical to develop skills that equip you to do the job. Explore our online course, Management Essentials, and discover how you can use organizational processes to your advantage and lead change. Businesses must constantly evolve.
Thank you. So that particular video laid the foundation of what we need to know in order to manage change successfully. You notice at the beginning, it showed the case study, why the business case, why it is important that organizations should consider changing and consistently work on those at this point in time. He went further to describe 5 stages or steps that you go through in your change management process up to the point of lessons learned at the end of that particular process. Indeed, Have you been involved in any change management initiative in your institution recently? Whether it is small or large-scale change management as the case may be. What was your experience like in that particular initiative? Was it by your own standard, by the measures of those who started the change initiative? Do you consider it successful? What were the challenges in those particular change initiatives you went through? These are thoughts that you may want to run through your mind as we go through our conversation today at this point in time. So let's see change management in disruptive times. The beauty of change today is that when you think everything is okay, when you think everything is normal, that things are beginning to stabilize as the case may be, instantly something changes at that point in time. Think about it. Let's just look at 2023, this particular year. Somewhere around January or thereabout, we were struggling with the FX rates. The change in FX rate, and the dollar was going high. And it went from 600 to 800 as the case may be. Businesses were struggling with that particular change. Then somewhere around February, as we went into the month of February, we were hit by another change in our environment, which was the change of currencies. Those change of currencies slowed down and crippled some of the various parts of the economy, as individuals did not have access to sufficient currency or naira to be able to do transact business as the case is. And a lot of businesses either slowed down or nearly shut down briefly for that particular period. Some individuals asked their staff to start working from home and gave leave of absence to a lot of individuals. That's change that they thought they didn't see coming initially, and then it hit them at that point in time. And then again, much recently, as we handed over or transitioned into a new government, as the case may be, a new change hit us at that point in time. And that has to do with the pricing of our fuel, as the case is. Again, disruption that we see around us. These are just national issues that you find within our country. Depending on your industry, your line of business and things like that, you may also be hit by other global issues that you're facing at that point in time. And this will continue to give you constraints as the case is. And it is not over, right? The cost of doing business is going to rise. Right now, various industries are trying to stabilize, taking a decision on what they are going to do, how they are going to respond, as the case is. Cost of power will go up. Cost of production will go up. Various costs across board will go up. The first thing that we noticed that went up was transportation. All right, so people were crippled and they couldn't move around. But other factors in the economy will eventually respond as there is stability in that particular area. So get ready for that particular change. Now, these disruptive times that we find ourselves in is just a tip of the iceberg of some of the things that we are seeing and that we expect to see as we move forward. Change is a common thread that runs through all business. It doesn't matter your size of business. Whether you're a small business, what people generally call a one-man business, or you're a small mid-sized enterprise having about 50 staff, 50 employees, doing a maximum of 100 million naira transaction in a year, you are subject to these change issues happening to you. If you don't have change constraints in terms of people, you have change constraints in terms of the line of business and your customers or the industry that you play in. Or if you're a mid-sized business operating at ₦1 billion naira as the case may be, having about 200 to 1,000 workforce as the case is, you are also prone to a lot of these particular changes. Or you're a large-sized institution having over 5,000 employees as the case is, you're also struggling with some of these particular change problems that we see around us. Or perhaps it's your industry. Whether you're in the financial services, or you're in the manufacturing as the case is, or you're in the telecoms, or you're in the transportation, no matter the industry you are in, you are struggling with various changes. In particular, our friends in the public sector are going through serious change during this particular period of time. In the past 3 months and up to the end of this year, that particular industry will experience quite a lot of shake and change, both in structure, in modus of operations, in processes, in policies, as the case may be. So that's a huge change facing them in that particular industry. Or we're talking about the age of your organization. Maybe you're a startup, you just started. You are less than 5 years old in the market, so to speak. you notice that the dynamics of your business plan, the business model you started off with before, is not working 100% as you planned. It's not the way you thought it because you're hit by external forces, external factors at that point. Or you're a mid-size, stabilized, matured organization. You've passed the growing phase. You're cruising, as the case is. You notice that either competition is nibbling at your customers or is taking away some of your food and things like that. So you're struggling also. Or perhaps you are an ancient institution. You've gotten old, so to speak, and you're shrinking, you're declining in workforce, you're declining in production, you're declining in customer base, you're declining in revenue, as the case is. Change hits all of us across this particular industry. So no individual, no CEO, no executive team will say that they are free from this particular change. So that's one thing we need to lay at the beginning at this point in time. Now, organizations need to handle change well for them to thrive. If not so, they will struggle to survive, as the case is. If you're not able to weather each storm, I mean, look at the past 3 years, right? From the period of the pandemic and all the other transitions and changes we've had up till this point in time. There are institutions that perhaps you are aware of, but they have left. They've gone. They've lost it, and they are no longer in a viable institution at this point in time. Some of them were not able to thrive. They couldn't handle change very well, and so they folded, or they had to return their license, as the case is. Some 1 month ago or thereabout, CBN announced a list of microfinance banks that are on their watch list or that they are withdrawing licenses from. And it was a very long list, as the case may be. That's to show you that there are institutions that are unable to meet the requirements that they once upon a time met. And these are most probably by changes that has affected them gravely at that point in time. So is it that you're thriving as an organization or you're struggling to survive, as the case is? Think about your institution. Where are you? Are you thriving or are you struggling at this point in time? Or are you somewhere in between, so to speak, tilted a little bit to thriving or tilted a little bit to surviving, as the case is at this time? Then the concept of change management is very familiar. There is no business that does not understand that concept. But it is one thing to understand it, is another thing to actually use it to advantage. Change is constant. It must happen, and we must deal with it at various points in our institution. Now, here is a little model that I'm going to share with you that helps you to appreciate the various perspectives when it comes to change. For one thing, change is risk inclined. So we will not take it away from this conversation. Change will always provide to us a lot of risk that we'll have to manage, we'll have to deal with at this point in time. And it could be high risk, it can be low risk. It can be high power driven risk, or it can be low power driven risk at that point. It depends on time, and then it depends on the kind of authority the organization has over risk, over change at that point in time. The overt change model and the change management system presupposes that we need to pay attention to education. Education is in the standpoint of, are your employees informed about the change process? Do they understand what it means when the organization is going through change? Are they trained, educated well enough to take advantage of these change initiatives and the issues that presents itself at that point in time? How about incentives? Are there incentives that will encourage them to gravitate towards change, to welcome change, and to use change to their advantage within the organization? Because sometimes we believe that once we announce change, everybody must fall in line. But change doesn't always work that way. Even with our little children at home, sometimes you introduce some treats, some biscuits, some ice cream, some sweets, as the case may be, in order to encourage them or to get them to do what you expect them to do. Those are examples of incentives you're providing in order to drive change. If you're changing line of business, maybe you're a corporate focused business and you're not going retail, you want to focus on retail as the case may be, what are the incentives in place to ensure that your team members are able to make that change to retail? But of course, beyond incentive, there is also coercion. In some cases, you may be forced to use your policy and insist on certain things being done in certain ways. That means there will be sanctions for individuals that do not respond to the change initiative at that point in time. But I always encourage that we are careful about the use of coercion. Even worse, we should be much, much careful in using compulsion. Institutions where they use compulsion is where they say, is either you change or is the highway. You will change, you adapt, you come in line, you fall in line, or you get out of the organization as the case is. The question is that someday you may get people who eventually will comply. But complying at that point in time does not mean they believe, they accept. Once the pressure is no longer there, you will notice that they will go back to their old ways. Your change management should lead people to be committed to the change and not to comply to the change. You need commitment, not compliance, as the case is, in order for you to drive change successfully at that point in time. Now, note that this depends on time. Some institutions can start with education. If you look at our graph here, they start with education. They teach, they train about change. After teaching and training about change, they introduce incentives. And then after introducing incentives, they now introduce coercion. And after coercion, they introduce compulsion. You can see the graph here as it leads down. This shows that they can move from high risk level to a low risk level by taking their people along this change initiative and change journey. At the same time also, if it is a high-powered institution, it's also important that they should be able to reduce this particular risk. Flip side, some institutions might choose the other path and start by compulsion and then move to coercion and then eventually rise up to education and training. But sometimes at that point in time, your team members have shut down. They are not listening to you again. Say anything they say we will do. After all, that's the way they want it. So you will not get the kind of buy-in, the kind of excitement, enthusiasm you expect your team members to bring to the table at that point in time to be able to drive your change initiative. Now, one would say a change strategy should be non-overt. What we are referring to, are you able to exploit the understanding of human behavior? According to the various motivation theories, it says that when you incentivize humans, the tendency is that they will gravitate towards the incentive. And according to Peter Drucker, what gets measured gets done. And then Robert Kaplan adds to it, what gets rewarded gets repeated, as the case is. So if you want to ensure that you're going to have change in your environment, then you must put in place role models that are living the brand, living the new change initiative that you expect. Someone or some individuals in the organization should be acting according to the line of the new change. And these role models, it is best if they are the executive levels. The more senior they are, the more buy-in you will get from your organization to be able to drive the change at that point in time. You also need to float ideas. What it means is that get people into focus group sessions, run surveys, run engagements, ask people for their opinions, engage them, share thoughts with them. People get to be much more interested in your change and ready to support you if you carry them along. Merely asking for the ideas, it doesn't mean you have to take all the ideas you hear, but at least engaging them at that point in time gives them the feeling that their voice counts. And that makes them want to be involved at that point in time. You could also create opportunities to educate, to broaden the horizon. Because sometimes some of your team members do not see the big picture for which you're driving change for. Like if you're doing cultural change in the organization, some individuals don't understand why you should change. If you're doing structural change in the organization, some individuals don't understand why the structure is being adjusted. After all, we are producing results. Or you're doing a line of business change, so to speak. You're going through an M&A, a merger, an acquisition, an expansion decision, as the case is. Some individuals will doubt it, but you can broaden their horizon, create opportunities for them to understand by educating and training them. So workshop programs will work very well at this point in time, and study visits. If you're able to visit locations where things are happening well, take some of your executives on tours, perhaps to other industries, to other organizations where these things are working very well. So when they get there and see those things, they are like, okay, this makes sense. I think we should go back to our organization and adopt similarly. Then there's also networking. You can look at strategically who are the influential people in the organization, not necessarily your leadership team. There are individuals who people respect in the organization. They have charisma. Whatever they say, people like it. People follow them. These people are your gang leaders, so to speak, inside the organization. Those people who are influential, engage them first. Let them be on your side, and they will help you to drive your change initiative as much as possible. Then look at the entire organization. Teamwork. What are the various roles each individual or each team, each department is playing to ensure that your change initiative is successful? Some are explorers. Let's try it and see what it looks like. Some are advisors. They will not do, but they have all the answers. They will be telling you, please do it like this. Why don't you try it like this? So they tend to advise. While some others are very good in planning. They will organize all the change initiatives, so to speak, but they are not very good with the implementation of those change initiatives. You have team individuals who are also like auditors or controllers who ensure that everybody falls in line at that point. Make sure that you allocate various roles properly to individuals who it fits as much as possible. Don't make someone who is very good with organizing and make him to become in charge of providing advice. Organizers usually don't bring advice. They take existing advices and work with it at that point in time. Then finally, ensure there is ownership. Drive ownership across the institution as much as possible. Also, other things you can do is you can look at your accounting and financial systems, your planning and management tools, your work plans, put a work plan in place. All right, make sure you supervise what is going on, the change initiative. There must be a change committee. There must be an executive team that listens to that committee and hears what is going on at that point in time. All right, and then make sure you pause and evaluate. Is there need for further changes? Or the change we've done, is it enough at that point in time? How do we reinforce the impact and the successes we've had so far? Remember in the concluding part of that particular video, we say you should not end your change initiative without doing a lessons learned, without doing a review. That when you finish doing that particular review, you will find one of two things. One, it worked very well as planned. And if it worked very well as planned, he is asking the question, can we replicate it? What other parts of the organization, what other areas can we replicate this? Two, it didn't work as planned. In that case, you begin to ask the secondary question, what went wrong? How did you get it wrong? What were the missing parts? What were in our blind spots that would not take note about at that point in time? So that you can go and correct them and then try and run the change initiative again, as the case may be, if it is still necessary at that point in time. Now, there are various change management models. And here are the globally accepted change management model. All right, here are about 14 of them. In fact, the discipline of change management is very broad. There are various authorities and people who have spoken to change management from various industries and various environments. I am just going to share with us a few of them. We're going to talk about six of these. There is a Kubler-Ross, there is a McKinsey 7, there is the Bridges transition model, there is the Kotter's 8-step change model, Lewin's 3-step change management, and then the ADKAR model. I'm just going to spend time talking about these 6. Because of our time, we cannot cover all the change management model as the case is at this point in time. So Kubler believes that change happens like a wave, all right? That change happens through a series of up and down within the organization. And he defined it using this particular model. He says the very first time a change initiative is announced, people are in shock. People resist. People fight back. People wonder, why is it like that? So there are emotional changes that people bring to the table once there's a change initiative that is announced. Sometimes they live in denial, not agreeing that it is not possible. No, they can't do that. Management cannot do that. And when you hear people say, no, it's not possible, they can't do that, those people are living in denial, all right? And then from that point in time, they move from living in denial to anger. They get upset. Some people also become vindictive. They begin to erode value because of the change you're introducing at that point in time within the organization. But once they begin to notice that you are not abating, you're not giving up with the change initiative, they begin to bargain with you. They begin to negotiate. So, okay, if this will happen, then they must increase this. Each time employees start saying if, then they are the bargaining mood with management at that point in time. Then if we must continue to come to work, show up early on time, they must provide staff bus, they must increase transport allowance, they must put cola. Those are examples of them bargaining with the change initiative on the change in fuel price and the hike in transport, as the case may be at that point in time. So they are bargaining with the organization. But it depends on how the organization responds at that point in time. If the organization responds favorably, they move straight to acceptance. But if the organization insists and does not respond favorably, they move into a mode of depression. They become moody. They begin to slow down production. They begin to reduce the work they do, as the case may be, because they feel that they are being shortchanged at that point in time. Then after a while, they have no choice. They begin to accept and comply at that point in time. So that's Kobler's change management model, right? And if you follow this model, you notice that it works very well. So the critical 5 in this particular area says denial, disbelief, and looking for evidence that it is not true, that this thing cannot work. There is also frustration. They begin to demonstrate their frustration on the process at that point. They acknowledge things are different though, but there's some internal anger. There's some internal frustration, and some who are bold will voice it out within the organization. Then there is depression. You see their mood, and their energy is as if they've been deflated like a balloon, and they drag themselves to do some work that is expected of them within the organization at that point in time. Then they move from that state of depression into trying to accept. Okay, let's experiment. Let's just even do small. This thing they are saying, let's even try it. Let's do small of it. And then they begin to engage the change. They engage with the change gradually, bit by bit. And they begin to learn that, okay, it's not so bad after all. And then they begin to either comply or commit, depending on how management is driving the change initiative at that time. So in doing this model, here is a template for you. If you choose to use the Kobler's rules model, here is a template. Ask yourself, if your team members respond with denial, with frustration, with depression, they begin to experiment and you see decision, what strategies will you use to ensure that change continues? So you need to be upfront, plan very well. Before you start the change initiative, fill this form. And be clear, what are the things you're going to do? If you see frustration, if you see depression, what do you do? Some institutions, once they see depression, they begin to engage the employees. They begin to motivate them, encourage them, tell them that don't worry, there is light at the end of the tunnel. While some organizations, if they are frustrated or they are showing depression, say like, if they don't want to stay, let them go. Some institutions respond differently. So ask yourself upfront, this is how to ensure that your change initiative is successful down the line at that point in time. Okay, so this is other versions of the template that we shared with you. You can also review it and use that to decide how to progress. All right. Okay, good. So the next one is Lewin's, and Lewin's is very popular. If you've done your international certification, most probably you will have come across the Lewin's change management theory and Kotter's change management theory. So for Lewin, it is very clear. He gave 3 steps. Unlike Kobler, that gave about 5 to 6 steps in his own process. Lewin says change is straightforward. Unfreeze the current state, the way things are going to unfreeze it, all right? Shake it up as the case is. Then proceed to change. Make the change happen. And after you've made the change happen, refreeze the new states. and create a culture out of it at that point in time. And that's Lewin's model of change management. Let's expand on this a little bit. One would say unfreezing, what are you expected to do? At the unfreezing point, you are expected to create change readiness in your team. Let them be ready to welcome the change at that point in time. You don't just declare the change overnight and tell them that this is the new thing. But you tell them, no, gradually, guys, in the next 6 months, we are going to be having this. In the next 4 months, guys, I told you 4 months ago, it's now 2 months now. So you're preparing their minds towards that particular change at that point. If it is a resource issue that you want to stop in the organization, you begin to reduce the resource, withdraw the resource gradually. So you're gradually unfreezing the old state at that point in time. What is involved here? You educate, you inform, you consult, you seek their opinion, you seek their views. Remember, we said initially, when you consult, you can do focus group, you can run surveys with them at that point in time. Then you plan how to proceed with the change initiative, create work plans on how to move at that point in time. Most important, get stakeholders on board, like leaders, your executive management, like your line managers, who will be working with the various employees, and then various teams that are most affected by this change initiative. So you try to get all that on board at that point in time. Then you now move to the second phase, which is the implementation. Because remember, in the unfree state, you created work plans. You created a plan of execution of the change at that point in time. During implementation, praise those who have changed. Encourage them, recognize them, champion them, celebrate them as the case may be. Get those who are changing already, who understand it, to begin to coach those who are struggling. Run training like training is going out of fashion. Provide leadership and mentorship as the case is. And then manage anomalies or deviations here and there. Provide guidance at that point in time. Give regular feedback of the progress of your change initiative at that point. And then provide sufficient resource. You don't tell people that going forward, we shall not be using this particular car. But meanwhile, you did not provide another vehicle for them to use at that point in time. So you must provide sufficient resource for them at that point in time. I remember a particular financial institution that canceled the use of a particular note counting machine. And then they say they are deploying new note counting machine and ask all the locations to withdraw the old ones. The team that were withdrawing the old ones were faster than the teams that were deploying the new ones. So some locations ended up not having the old machine or even the new machine. And their level of transaction problems increased. There was a lot of cash shortage. There was a lot of cash overage in those particular areas. So in implementation, flawless execution is very important. So you don't make your people have reasons to go back to the old states that you have moved them away from at that point in time. Then you refreeze. You now go to the last phase, according to Lewin. In refreezing, you make the new change that you have to make it stick. Make it a culture at that point. Have you noticed that in stage 1 and stage 2, nobody was sanctioned? Nobody was punished, whether they did it or they didn't do it, as the case is. But in stage 3, you begin to set KPIs, performance indicators. You need to monitor and track progress and the level of commitment and compliance on the change at that point in time. You establish systems that ensures that the change remains and stays at that point in time. Then you continue to reward like you were rewarding initially in the implementation phase. You continue to reward, but you also sanction, especially for behaviors that are not in alignment with what you want, or behaviors that still remain in the old state at that point in time. And then continue this process until you have some measure of stability. One problem with our change initiative is that we shut down the change initiative or close the committee or shut down the whole process too early before the change is now culture. We say, okay, well, they are finished implementing, or our committee dissolved. Meanwhile, there are pockets of people in various areas that are still struggling to comply. And because you've dissolved the committee, there is nobody watching again and see whether things are happening. And then you've noticed gradually, we go back to the old state. So there must be a period of relative stability before you declare that the change process has been completed at that point in time. So Lewins was very clear, right? So unfreeze is all about planning, right? Plan for the change. The change model, the middle, is where action is taken. You actually implement what you have said at that point in time. But note, while you're implementing or taking action, you're providing feedback to see whether we need to replan. Because sometimes when the rubber meets the road, we notice that our initial plans are not complete. We didn't plan for enough resources. We didn't plan for enough engagement. So you need to do that. You need to go back at that point in time. Then you move to your refreeze, which is where you begin to take advantage of the results for which you have planned your change initiative for at that point in time. So concluding on Lewin, Lewin simply said that you need to unfreeze the old status quo where we are, right? Unfreeze these states that we are at this point in time. Once you shake it up a little bit, then you move us to the stage that we have to be at that point in time, and then you refreeze. You notice that the desired state, we've been able to move from status quo to a desired state. Now note, if you fail with your change initiative, sometimes you will fall below status quo. When you fail and everybody abandons the change initiative, it may come down even below where you started initially. And if this change initiative is driven by a particular department, that department, because of the failure of that change, will have a bad name in the organization. People will begin to say, even at the executive management, that department is not able to do anything. They are not strong. They cannot handle certain things very well. As the case, there was even common change in this area. They could not implement it. So be careful when you run a change initiative and ensure that all the arsenals you need are in place so you can be successful at it. Now, it is not in all cases that your change initiative will arrive at your planned desired state. It is possible that instead of arriving at this level, you will have arrived at this level. But again, that is a step in the right direction. You can then do a phase 2. You can then do a phase 3, as the case may be at that point in time, to be able to implement your change. The third one is Kotter. And Kotter has one of the most expansive change initiative model, as the case is. He has an 8-step process for a change management, as the case is here. Kotter recommended 8 steps. First, create a sense of urgency. Let everybody know that there is fire on the mountain. Run, run, run. Create a sense of urgency by showing people why the old state, we cannot continue with the old state. Share information, share presentation, share data that shows that we are hurting ourselves. We are losing, we are shortchanging ourselves by remaining in the way we are. Make it a front burner for executive management. Then you move to stage 2. And in stage 2, you're looking for a coalition, a set of individuals within the organization that you can team together and become the driving force of the change. Now, this coalition will now sit together and create a vision for the intended change. And that's your step 3. What you have done in step 1 to step 3 is what we say as create a climate. Create an enabling environment for change. 1, you have shaken the people. They are now hungry for the change. Please, we want the change now. 2, you have a team of people who are excited, passionate, and they are ready to drive the change. And then 3, you have direction. You have focus. You have vision of where you're going to. You have a giant billboard, a giant poster that shows what the future looks like when we finish changing. So the climate has been set. Then you now move to enabling the organization to actually change. That vision that was created in step 3, you communicate it across board to the entire organization. You run various campaigns. You run blogs, you run video sessions, you do focus groups, you go visit various locations and run in-house sessions with them. You're trying to communicate that vision with them. Then you begin to empower them. Whoever needs a resource in order to make the change happen, you declare that resource. You provide those particular things. You give people the powers and the authority to take decisions so that the change will actually happen at that point in time. Then as you begin to see those changes from those who were empowered, you'll begin to see some of them. You assess the quick wins. You take advantage of the quick wins that you're seeing from that particular change and begin to communicate it to the rest of the organization that, our change effort is having progress. is having success. We have benefited from this, we've achieved this, we've achieved that. And it will help if your executive team can actually come and praise those people who are championing the change at that point in time. Because whenever you praise a particular set of individuals, people tend to believe that they must be getting some things right. And it also encourages them to continue on that journey. In the final stages of the Kottas change management model is where you begin to build on that particular change. You begin to solidify. We like to use the expression cement. Okay, after laying the concrete, laying all the things on the ground, you now pour cement on top of it in order to make it solid, what you have built at that point in time. You make it stick. You make it stay at that point in time. So you are ensuring sustainability of the change initiative that you have declared up to that point. The fourth one is ATCA. And ATCA is very scientific, unlike the entire ones that we've looked at so far. All right. It is rarely used by the faint-hearted. It is usually used by organizations and institutions that are doing large-scale change initiatives that will be met with a lot of stakeholders and possible resistance across board. So ATCA is actually an acronym for awareness, stage one. You must create awareness for that particular change to all stakeholders who are affected by the change directly or indirectly. 2, D, desire. You must build and well up the desires within the team to want to participate, to want to be a part of that change initiative. They would like to have it on their CV that, I was in this organization when this change happened. So create that desire. Make people feel that it's a noble thing to be part of that particular change initiative. Then train people, K, knowledge, provide the knowledge of how to go about the change, of how to implement that particular change. A, ability. You need to support your team members with the necessary skills, with the necessary behaviors for them to implement it successfully at that point. And finally, like all the other change initiatives we've seen, the last one, R, is reinforcement. So you reinforce and ensure that the change you have put in place is sustained. So Lewin, Kotter, and ATCA favor that at the end of the change initiative, you must sustain it. It is unlike Cobbler that we saw earlier. Cobbler is usually used in a military or an authoritarian environment, if that is the kind of organization you have. So those are the kind of environment where you use Cobbler. And Cobbler is also used for policy-driven change initiatives, where there is no good turning back, where at the end of it, sanctions will begin to follow at that point in time. So these ones help you to sustain change in large-scale environments or large-scale change, and also for cultural-related changes at that point in time. So still part of your ATCA's change initiative, you begin to see things like, what is the business need for your change? Why are we changing? What is driving this particular change? So you must be clear on the organizational need, why we want to change. Are we having attrition rates? Are we having low productivity? Are we having employees not climbing the corporate ladder very well? Are we having business dwindling? So you must be clear on the need that is driving the change you want to put in place. Then you design the change initiative, which is what is referred to as the concept and the design. You go ahead and implement your change and also take lessons learned at the end of that particular change exercise. So like we said earlier on ATCA, right? There is awareness, what is it? And what is happening, what is not happening very well. You communicate the change. You focus attention on the most important reason why we need to change, all right? Then there's desire. You communicate benefits, why people should adopt it, why people should focus on it at that point in time. And you progress down to create the knowledge that they need, and then create the ability by giving them the training to build the skills, and then you reinforce what you're doing at that point in time. So this is an example of a Scrum-based change initiative that an organization may be running at that point in time. Again, so your ATCA model, organizational change and management initiatives, you must communicate, create awareness, You must provide a roadmap, right? You must provide training. You must manage resistance, and then you need to coach. And some of the change management activities that are involved in this thing include communication and sponsorship activities, resistance management and sponsors activities, then training, and communication. So if you're in charge of change initiative in your institution, then you must look at some of these particular things in order to drive it successfully. So these are further information that can help you on the ATCAR model. Number 5 is the McKinsey model, the 7S, all right, of change management initiative. And according to McKinsey, their 7S helps institutions to ensure that they have a vibrant organization. Strategy, is there a strategy in place in the organization? That strategy must pay attention to the corporate strategy, the organizational strategy, the business strategy, and the functional strategy. So you must have at least 3 levels of strategy within the organization. Does your organization currently have those levels of strategy? Are there organizational goals? Are there functional or departmental goals in place? Are there business goals in place that we are pursuing? Structure. What is the configuration of the organization? And when we say structure, we're not just talking about reporting line. This person reports to this person, this reports to that person. Structure also includes the way the business is organized, the business structure as the case is. Are we a project-based organization? Are we regionally structured? Are we structured according to products? Like there are some institutions that they are structured according to the brands that they have. So they have a brand manager or a brand ED for each of the brands that they have at that point in time. Or you're geographically structured. So there's an executive director, a general manager in charge of North. There's one in charge of East. There's one in charge of West, as the case is. Each of these high-level executives are like CEOs of the region where they are in at that point. So that, again, is another kind of structure. Or are you running a blend of some of these things we've mentioned? Depending on the structure you have, change may be easy or difficult within that particular environment. Then there is also your shared values. What keeps us together? What singular thread can we say is what we stand for within the organization? And these are the values within that particular organization. What are the requisite skills? What we refer to as your competency model that ensures the organization will always deliver results. And do we have all those competencies within the organization? So your skills, those competencies can be looked at from your organizational competence that everybody in the organization, depending on their grade level, must have at that point in time. Then the functional competencies, depending on the function you are working in, you must have those particular competencies to deliver the goals of that particular function at that point in time. All right, that is very critical. Then how about our workforce? Do we have the numbers that we expect? If their strategy, our corporate strategy, our business strategy, our functional strategy demands that we have 1,000 staff, do we have 800? If we have 800, why are we then struggling for results? It's obvious. Or are we over bloated? The business says we should be 500, but at this point in time, we are 650. We are inefficient. We are wasting resources, as the case may be. In fact, once you are an over bloated organization, you notice that you most probably have a lot of issues, cultural issues and people issues in that particular organization, because we have enough time for those particular problems. Now, beyond the number of staff, there's also the talents that we should have in the organization. There are certain critical talents that must be connected to certain critical jobs. Are our critical jobs manned by critical talents? Do we have a talent pool of individuals who are being prepared for future opportunities and future jobs in the organization? Or are we always reacting to changes in our staffing model, as the case may be? Then your style of management, your leadership style. There are authoritarian leaders who take the decision alone. Once in a while, they consult a few persons. They call for business meeting and tell guys, there's a problem, and I've x-rayed the problem. This is the way we're going to go to. Finance, do this. HR, do that. So they are like one-man squad. They have the problem, they have the solutions, they declare. Is that the management style you have in your organization? There's also the goal-oriented, pace-setter kind of leadership style. That from beginning, everybody, they declare the goals. Look, you in finance, this is your goal. You in this place is your goal. And they have a performance management system in place They trust the process to ensure that it supports it very well. And then, of course, there's the laissez-faire leadership and management team where anybody does what he wants. Should you have job description, go and do what your job description says. Finally is your system. With all the things we've said, all right, systems are like the fabric that makes sure that you can have consistency in the way things are done in the organization. And if it is automated, then there is predictability of the things that are done at that point in time. So McKinsey's 7S framework can help you to restructure an organization. If you look at these 7 areas and then you question which of the areas is your organization failing in, note that when you run change initiative using the McKinsey 7S, it may not be appropriate to adjust all 7 at the same time. You may have chaos within the organization at that point in time. So when you finish profiling and understanding where the issues are within the organization, you need to prioritize, or you may need to pilot. So let's work on culture. Let's work on structure this particular period. Later, we'll work on skills. Let's work on strategy now. Later, we'll work on systems. So you need to prioritize how to engage in that particular area so you don't have too much issues at that point in time. And the last one is the bridge change transition model. The bridge change transition model is a beautiful model that tends to look at you starting from the end, right? You start with the end in mind, so to speak. It looks at uncertainty. What are the things that are affecting us? What are the issues we are struggling with at this point in time? And usually once there's uncertainty, people are skeptical about the future. And you need them to transit to a new position. They need to explore new opportunities at that point in time. You need them to commit at that point to be able to deliver results as much as possible. This particular brief, if you look at it very well, whenever you are at the beginning and you're trying to make changes, productivity will drop. Once you introduce that change initiative at that point in time, there is shock, there is anger, there's denial, there's fear, people are sad. Then you begin to transit them to the new phase. As you're transiting them to the new phase, there's a lot of confusion. Who is responsible for what? Sometimes we are disoriented. Sometimes we fold our hands and do nothing because I don't know what is expected of me in this new area. So there's still some measure of frustration and apathy in the system at that point. But as things begin to fall in place and they begin to look good at that point, the future becomes clearer. People begin to re-energize. They become committed. They become excited. The unfortunate thing about the bridge model is that some of your best hands may resign and leave before you finish the process. And that can hurt you because you will have lost value at that point in time when you started. But note that in this particular model, while you're making that particular change, you notice that there's some significant change that you will have experienced at that point in time in the organization. From here, where productivity was low, you make your changes and productivity came to the minimal point and then expanded to the maximum point at this point in time. And what determines the level of productivity you are going to achieve at that particular level here at this point is dependent on your ability to carry your team members along very well. The bridge transition model works hand in hand or can be compared to the cobbler's rose model that we saw at the beginning, right? Those two can help you. If you match the two of them together, you can manage that change effectively at that point. So we are coming to the end of our conversation. I'm going to give you 3 tools that you can use in order to continue to manage your change initiative. The first tool is our recommended change management plan. Before you start any change initiative, please take a copy of this particular page. In fact, take a snapshot of the screen now, right? And please put a plan in place. Plan name. What is the change initiative you want to implement? Who is the sponsor behind this change? And usually the sponsor should be someone as senior as possible that can help you or can help the team ensure that he bulldozes or clears the path so you can actually progress to completion. When do you plan this change initiative to start? When would we have realized the benefits of this particular change? So management would like to see end to end. When is our start date? When is our probable end date on this particular change initiative? Then be very clear on your stakeholders. This plan, this change you want to make happen, Who are the stakeholders that will be affected? What departments will suffer from it? What departments will benefit from it? What groups, grade levels, or business units or individuals within the organization will be affected by this? Or are there other external stakeholders that your change initiative is going to affect? List all the stakeholders at that point. In a separate document, you can do stakeholder plan in that particular document, or stakeholder engagement on that document. Then let's look at the change properly. Change description. What exactly is the change you want to execute? What is the specific change? What is the organizational need? What is the business case driving the need for us to make this particular change? Do we have a financial crisis? Do we have a business issue that we're trying to address at that point in time? What are the expected results? If we succeed in this change initiative, what are the results we're going to get? And those results must be very specific, very measurable. If possible, they must be smart. So when we finish the change initiative, we can actually say that, yes, we've achieved this result by 60%, by 70%, by 80%, as the case is. That's your change management plan. The second tool you will need to have in your arsenal is your change management roadmap, right? Now, it follows from the change management plan. Once you have described the change and what you're going to achieve, you break that particular change into milestones. Milestone 1, milestone 2, milestone 3, the various milestones that we're going to achieve. And what are those milestones? For each milestone, there must be a change leader or a change manager. You cannot use the project manager and say, the project manager of this initiative is the person in charge of all the milestones. No. You need an individual or a team, but preferably an individual who is a change manager or leader for each of those particular milestones at that point in time. This way, we spread the risk and ensure that there is more buy-in from various individuals within the organization at that point in time. The next thing, for each of the milestones we've identified, which of the milestones are of a priority to us in the organization? High priority, medium priority, low priority. The one that is of a high priority, you have to give it the best manager because you need the results from that particular area. When did you assign this project, this sub-project or milestone to the individual? When is the due date expected? And as you meet regularly to review the progress, the project manager and these individuals, you need to also be able to address some of those concerns at that point in time. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Then the status and then the resistance. Sometimes the change initiatives, they are running into resistance. They are meeting resistance along the line where they're going at those points in time. They are meeting with issues with it. So you must engage with them to discuss those particular problems that they have at that point in time. Okay? No. Connection. The next one is your change readiness assessment. Your change readiness assessment is now checking the organization. Are we ready for this change? Like we say in project management, don't start a project and then end up having an abandoned project and you don't have enough resources to complete that particular project. Who are the various stakeholder groups that will affect this particular change at this point in time? That will affect the progress you're making to be able to achieve results at that point in time. What is the impact? What is the impact of this change and how will that affect the organization? When are we going to go live? Are we ready for going live? If we are ready to go live, what percentage readiness are we at that point in time in order to go live? At that point, all right? And how about your engagement completion? Have you engaged the various stakeholders? Those particular stakeholders, to what level of engagement? You know, in previous slide, in the change management plan, we listed the stakeholders. Have you engaged each of those stakeholders? it is very critical that all stakeholders must be engaged, because one stakeholder you don't engage may feel that you didn't consider him very important and might become the stumbling block or the cog in the wheel of the progress of your change initiative. No stakeholder should be treated with levity, as the case is. Even though there are various grades of stakeholders, don't make someone feel or make a stakeholder group feel that they are unimportant. Imagine in an organization where you're doing a change initiative and one of your stakeholders are the labor union, and you say the labor union are not important. Depending on your environment, that labor union may be the people that will shut down your change process. I remember a particular organization that was installing some new IT equipment. And based on those particular equipment, they would need to lay off about 70 staff, but did not engage labor union. They eventually bought the equipment, installed it, but the union fought back and they could not lay off the 70 staff. And for almost 1 year, they carried the 70 staff and they carried the new equipment that they bought at that point in time. So instead, for that year, they were running at double cost because they did not manage stakeholders very well. Then training completion. You know, in some of the conversations on all the change models that we saw, we say you must train, you must educate, right? What are the various curriculum to be trained for each of the stakeholders? Have we run those trainings? And then our stakeholders ready and agreed with us to move forward at that point in time. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. This is the end of our conversation. I welcome your questions, your feedback, your conversations around these particular models that we have shared and what you can do. Which of them are useful for you? What can you do with it, as the case is? Thank you very much. Thank you. So for the next 5 minutes, we shall take some questions and some thoughts. If you wish to speak, you can unmute yourself and speak and share or ask a question. And
good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Very audible.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Joel, for the impactful and insightful session. In my change management experience, I typically use the quotas framework. So I've known about ADKAR by the side, but I've never used it. In your experience, in organizational context, which of this framework will you advise on? You know, at what point do you consider whether to use ADKAR or quotas or Lewis? Or your experience, which one have you used largely for organizational change?
Okay, for what we have discussed so far, for your fundamental and basic institution, mid-sized organization, not too much crisis, not too much resistance, you can use the Lewin's change management initiative, which is the unfreeze, change, and then refreeze. So simple works in various environments. But for large institutions, for cultural changes, for serious change initiatives, you need to use something much more scientific, much more robust. And that is where ADKAR and also quota comes in place at that point in time. Now, depending on your, let me say, the savviness in terms of knowledge, in terms of understanding, in terms of your ability to engage and willingness to engage, because ADKAR requires a lot of engagements. In fact, ADKAR looks as if it is not the change management team that is running the change, it's the entire organization. So if you are able to get to a point where the entire organization is involved in the change and everybody is pulling his weight and doing his part, then you have to use ADKAR, because ADKAR is more robust at that point in time. But if you are running in an environment where the organization is large and you have some resistance, you may want to use quotas model, because quota allows you the privilege to form a coalition and then engage those stakeholders directly and see what you can get from them to buy it and move forward at that point. Finally, if your change initiative is a policy issue, is a no turning back issue, is a survival issue for the organization, for the business at that point. It is not a nice to have initiative. It's a must have. If not so, there's no more business or there's no more organization. Then you need to use cobbler that we said earlier, and also use the last one that we discussed, because it helps you, because those ones are seriously focused on driving process and delivering results at that point in time, because they help you to enforce policy and compliance at that point. You are not after commitments. You are after compliance within the organization at that time. So those are the various models that you may want to consider.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes. Any other questions, conversations? Thank you very much, Kemka. Michael, my colleagues will reach out to you. You may want to share, just chat the number through which you registered. Ali, yes, there is recording and this material is also available, but my team will require you to pay to have this access to this recording at 2,500, right? Kathy, do you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, okay. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Mr. Joel.
Good morning.
Thank you for this insightful section. First, I have just two questions, and one is, how do you engage and communicate with the stakeholder during the change initiative? That's one question. And then the other one is, how do you measure the success of a change management organization? Thank you.
Okay. Beautiful. So let me start with engagement. Let me go back to on this particular. When it comes to engagement, before you engage, before you start, let me not say before you engage, before you start your change initiative, you need to populate this plan. This document tells you what exactly you want to achieve. It also tells you who in the organization are going to be supporters or hindrance to being able to achieve this. Then from the next thing from this, which I didn't share, is your stakeholder management document or stakeholder engagement document. At that point, you begin to ask, what does this stakeholder need from us on this project for the person to buy in? Some of your stakeholders are just interested in being carried along. They want to be informed. They don't want to be hearing what is going on by the side, or when you call meeting for all the staff, that's when they hear, right? They want to be singled out and engaged. You notice that when you engage them and finish talking to them, there's no input. They say, okay, thank you very much. Carry on, you guys are doing well. That's all they need. But if you don't do that, they may fight the process. Meanwhile, there are some other stakeholders who you might consider as authorities, as subject matter experts, who know what you're trying to change or try to work towards. It is only fair that you pick their brains, that you engage them for their inputs. Let them become subject matter experts on that change initiative and that process. You will see that they will be more excited to drive the change process along with you, especially if you're using Kotlin. But those individuals should form part of your coalition group when you're moving forward at that point in time. Finally, if you suspect that your stakeholders will give you issues in terms of engagement, then you must use ADCAP. And you cannot progress to the next stage until you have carried all of them along. We are not saying that until they've agreed or until they've bought in, but they must be 100% aware anywhere they are, and they ask them about the change initiative. They should be able to defend that, well, this is what they are doing, this is what they achieved, but I don't agree with them. So they should be able to say, all your stakeholders, about what you're working at that point, at least up to the point at that time. So engagement starts with a plan. Who am I engaging? Why am I engaging them? What is the value from this? And when should I engage them in the stream of things? There are some people that you may engage them too late. You've already started before you engage them. They will now say, so we are afterthought. You remember us after you've gone far. We're hoping to see how you succeed. So be careful about your timing, right, on those particular engagements as much as possible. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, so 2 more minutes. If any other thoughts? Okay, so Francis says, if the change you are working on is focused on a department only, well, there's no department that is in isolation. Even if your change initiative is only for finance, if your change initiative is only for HR, as the case may be, you will still engage clients or customers of those departments. They will need to give you feedback about how those departments are engaging with them. So when you're engaging those individuals, you'll be able to give them greater value, so to speak. You'll be able to engage and provide better value for them. If you're changing something in HR, whatever you change in HR affects the organization. So most probably that change initiative for HR, you need to do it also, engage people outside. If you're changing something in finance, again, finance relates to various parts of the organization. So you're most probably going to run some focus group to hear what they are thinking about finance, about HR, before you progress with that particular change. And then, of course, you must engage the stakeholder. The primary stakeholder now being the finance team or the HR team that you're doing the change for at that point. Yeah. So that department, you need to engage them very well. And one of your sponsors should come from that department also. You will not be changing something in a department where there's a head of department and the sponsor is from outside. And you, the change person, is also from outside. So it's important that someone inside that department is also on board with you. It's like an external consultant coming into an organization. So the consultant has spoken to MD. MD has said, look, I want some changes in my finance. And then they send you to the finance as a consultant. And you don't go and sit with finance and you're trying to make changes at that point in time. The head of finance, the CFO, might give you issues because you did not consider to engage them before you finalize with the MD, as the case is at that point in time. Okay, thank you. All right, thanks a lot. We shall share the link to this particular recording later in the future, as the case is, but at this point in time, for those who are interested in accessing it immediately, my colleagues will reach out to you. Thank you very much for the audience and the opportunity to have shared this with you. Thank you all, and lovely day ahead.